Hello, NFL fans. Welcome to Hurdle the Line Week 2 review show. I am your host, Chapman, and tonight I have got a nice round table of teammates, starting with Tom. We've got Shaun, and we, of course, have the super producer, Fletch, with us tonight. How are we, gentlemen? I'm just going to go ahead and point out the obvious here. Two of us have lost games this weekend. One of us won a game, controversially. We will get to that later. One of us, weirdly enough, for the first time in 3 years, will be playing on Monday night for the world to watch. And I'm very nervous and very scared. But other than that, how's everybody doing?
Complain? Cannot complain.
Yeah, very good.
I've settled down from last night, so yeah, I'm
Always
all
better
right.
on a victory Monday. So.
I've noticed.
I wouldn't know.
Have you noticed that the air in the UK has just felt a little bit warmer since yesterday? I don't know. I feel like something in this country changed yesterday. You know, we lost a bit of joy for a month, and then now it's back.
Yes.
I don't know what it could be, but
I think you're talking about the Arsenal beating Tottenham yesterday.
Yes.
1-0. Hey-o. There's some good news
win. Come on.
here in North London. I am actually back in London, guys. For those of you who listen regularly, all three of you. I've been in Atlanta for several weeks, and I'm back home with my dog and my beautiful soon-to-be bride, which I'm very excited about. So just in time for my other football team to win. But we're not here to talk about NFL. I mean, we are here to talk about NFL. What a great host I am. We're not here to talk about EPL. Guys, I want to say, you know what it is, Fletch? It was the weekend of the underdog because underdogs against the spread this weekend were 9-5-1 and 7-8 straight up. And now, if you're betting people, that just means that underdogs, teams that were picked to not win in the betting circles, either beat the spread or won outright, which is great. And there's some really good games. And I think, I don't love 10 games in the our 6 o'clock, the 1 o'clock Eastern time time slot because it's just too much chaos. Would you guys agree? It's just too much.
It was a lot to keep up with, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was mentioned on Red Zone a good look by Mr. Hanses.
He was struggling. You could tell he was struggling to keep up. It's the first time I've thought, wow, Scott's struggling with this one.
Octobox is a lot. Decabox don't have the same ring to it, I don't think.
It reminds me of that thing from like the Dark Knight, you know, with like all the screens, like that's.
Or he's watching Gotham.
Yeah, literally.
Do you think Scott gets like all the screens of everything? You know, all the other feeds. Like he's just got 87. It'd be amazing every game.
He's got to have a lot. Yeah.
As somebody who works in the television and film industry professionally, I would say he is one of the most impressive presenters / hosts out there. And what he does every week is amazing. No, it was a really fun week. A lot of great games. I will totally admit I was slightly jet lagged yesterday watching, so I was like, my brain was processing slow. But I mean, the all the early games were freaking amazing. And then we had one great game, sort of obviously in the second time slot, which is the one we're going to start with. But first, as we always do, we're going to break the huddle. We're going to talk some news here. And unfortunately, it's a lot of injury news for one Super Bowl champion Chiefs. Starting with earlier, before Sunday started, we found out that Hollywood Brown is going to go on season-ending IR. Hasn't even played for the Chiefs yet this season and is already out for the season, which is unfortunate for Hollywood Brown. But I would say I think there's still a lot of wide receiver talent on that team. So I don't know. They're not hurting, but they will miss him, obviously, as a threat. More importantly, Isaiah Pacheco, he broke his fibula and will miss real time after last night's game against the Bengals. He had a great game last night. But I want to ask you, Tom, as our resident Sheets fan, are you cursed at running back, and does it matter?
I would say we probably are cursed at running back. But, there is a running back out there who I think the Chiefs should get. He's a free agent at the moment. He's got familiarity with the offense. Bring back Jerick McKinnon. He's good in pass as a pass blocker as well. So, in pass protection, the Chiefs need all that at the moment. So I'd say bring him back. But yeah, it's such a shame because Pacheco, as you said, he was having a really good game before that. Unfortunate injury, but I'm sure he'll bounce back and be running like the ground's on fire in probably 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, he will be missed. He did look good last night. In other news, non-injury related, Coach Dave Canales of the Carolina Panthers is benching number 1 overall pick Bryce Young. Obviously, he was the starting quarterback last year for them as rookie and has started 2 games, and they have looked abysmal. Andy Dalton's the backup. He'll be starting week 3. Shaun, what do you think about this?
It's the right decision. That team is just so bad. The line is bad downfield. Like they've got almost nothing downfield, and you can. What's also happening is you start to see frustration around. I know I saw images of Thielen really starting to get annoyed because he wasn't getting the passes off, and you feel if they're ever going to get anything out of Bryce Young, which is still yet to be determined, spending another year behind that line and just confidence sapping out and potentially getting injured. There's just no point. Bring in Dalton, see out the season, regroup, and see what they can do to rebuild because you're just throwing him to the wolves, and it's never going to. It's not going to do him any good. It's not going to do the organization any good.
Tom, Fletch, do you guys have any other points? What do you think?
I agree. I think it's right. So there's only so many ways you can tell whether someone's going to be a good or a bad quarterback. How he's going to be in the league is yet to be determined, but there's one way to always make sure that your quarterback doesn't succeed, and that's put him in a team like the Panthers are right now. No, nobody is going to survive, and the fact that he's still, I think, to be honest, in some cases, the fact he's still going at the moment. You saw yesterday, I was watching some of the clips of him, and at least 4 times I thought I was going to cry. And that's not a shot at Bryce. That's not a shot at Bryce Young either. It's got to be frustrating for him as well because it's not his. I don't blame him. It's not his fault. So I think putting a veteran in there who can probably just navigate that game a little bit better amidst the chaos can only help the Panthers and help Bryce just to kind of settle down a little bit.
A quick question there, because I've seen a few things floating about, and they're all wild, of course, because, X on NFL on X when this sort of stuff happens is always hilarious. But, do they consider trading him? Do they consider trying to cash in and get something for him? Do they have enough to build something for him in the short term?
What's his value right now?
Yeah, I don't think his value is worth.
Obviously, yeah, that's an issue.
I personally, I do think it's the right decision, both for the team and for Bryce's future. I'm a Georgia fan, and also an Atlanta Falcon fan, so doubly, don't have a lot to root for between his being an ex-Alabama guy and a Carolina Panther, but I do feel bad for him. And as somebody who he was so talented at Alabama, and I do think, there's a way for him to be successful in the NFL. There have been guys his size have come in, but it's just it's just too much of a challenge right now with that roster. And I think Dave Canales, it's a hard thing what he's doing, honestly, and I kind of applaud him for it. And I do hope Bryce gets a good shot, whether it's a year from now in Carolina. But what kind of happens is if things keep going worse, then the fans get mad and they want him back in, So it's like, I hope that they don't pull the old switcheroo here. But you never know. But it's going to be a really long year for Panthers fans. And as much as I dislike the Carolina Panthers, I kind of hate that for any fan base because it's just not fun. Anyway, speaking of not fun things, if you're a Christian McCaffrey fantasy owner, you did not have a fun week learning that he was going to go on IR this week. And hopefully you got, it's Jason? No, it's Jonathan Mason? I forgot his back.
Jordan Mason.
Jordan Mason. I knew there was a J name in there. Jordan Mason. I don't have him, but I don't have McCaffrey, so I'm fine. Yeah, he's going to be going on IR. I think this is the right move because obviously he came into the season with a calf injury, didn't play week 1 mysteriously, and then and was placed on IR. He will be missing, I believe, up to 6 weeks on that, and probably the right move for 49ers. I think they're going to be okay this first quarter of the season without him. Anyway, did that hurt any of your guys' fantasy teams?
No.
No, it helped me.
Luckily not. No.
I managed to get Mason in a couple of leagues as well, so I'm fine with it. It's great.
I'm not lucky enough to ever get the opportunity to pick that high in a draft, but the curse has struck again.
That's not a good. That's a good thing. If you look at like historically.
I know what you're talking about.
Picking week one is picking number one is almost very difficult to win from. If you look at statistically, usually mid or late is preferred.
Sean totally missed what you were talking about, Fletch.
If I had the physical edition, I would hold it up in front of me now. But I only have the digital, so holding a PlayStation like that's not going to work. So I'm going to just try and I've got the cover up on this little tablet here, so I'm just gonna. The curse strikes again, ladies and gentlemen. The curse strikes again. For those listening,
I have been a victim of the curse personally, so it's a tough one for those guys. But it looks like he'll be back.
You'll say for those listening on audio only, we're talking about the Madden curse, where cover stars get injured after being on the cover of Madden. But I realised audio only listeners there were a bit left out of that one.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Gentlemen, I think that's all for our news bits, unless anybody has anything else. No. Great. Moving right along. Well, this is why we're all here, guys. We're going to review week 2, all the games from Sunday. We're recording on Monday night. We have yet to see what happens with the Falcons-Eagles game. We might touch on it a little bit at the end here. But let's start off. I got to choose games of the week this week. I was the dictator, and I chose that the Chiefs-Bengals game, which is always a great matchup when it's Mahomes and Burrow, is a game of the week. The Chiefs were victorious, 26-25 over the Bengals at the very end. If I were to say to you, gentlemen, before this game, that Patrick Mahomes was only going to throw for 151 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and I said the score, would you pick the Bengals to win this game? Because I know I would. Tom, you're not allowed to say anything.
Probably, yeah. Doesn't sound like a great game from that start line for the Chiefs.
It does not. But once again, the Chiefs find a way to win in the fourth quarter when down, and it seems to keep happening. Burrow was he threw for 258, 2 TDs. The number one receiver on the Bengals was Mike Gillespie with 91 yards off 7 catches. Jamar Chase, who's been a lot of drama coming into this week, had only 35 yards. And as I said, Pacheco had he was the leading, he was kind of the star on offense with about 90 yards on the ground for the Chiefs. It was sort of a forgettable game for the Chiefs in terms of their offense. Burrow did good, but they seemed a little off balance. What did you guys think about this game? And then we can touch on the ending at the end.
Sorry, you go first.
No, so go. No, you go, Tom. You have more of a dog in this fight than I do.
Chiefs fan, with the Chiefs having 3 turnovers in this game, I didn't expect them to be able to overcome that. To be honest, it was only when late on in the game when Joe Burrow got taken down, fumbled, and Chamari Connor picked it up and ran it in for a score that, I thought that the Chiefs were going to win the game. It's always a nail biter, as you said, Chapman. Whenever these two teams play, it seems to be, within 1, 2, 3 points at all times. But yeah, as you said, Patrick Mahomes, both the picks were. The second one, was an incredible interception, to be fair, by Cam Taylor-Britt. One of the interceptions of the year. The first one was just a terrible throw. But yeah, and that was after Cam Taylor-Britt's comments earlier in the week about Xavier Worthy and stuff. So he kind of got a measure of revenge. But also early in the game, Rashee Rice scored a touchdown on him. So he kind of had a bit of a mixed bag. But yeah,
Worthy only held to only 17 yards in this game. But again, not like an overly offensive juggernaut game from either one of these two teams, which is kind of what we're somewhat used to, but not, it just felt like a week 2 game, to be honest with you.
Both teams, Chapman, if you think about it, the Chiefs went 1 for 8 on 3rd down, and the Bengals went 3 for 14, I think, which are absolutely atrocious numbers. And yet it was still, the game of the week. So Just shows how these teams are so well matched.
I think, and we say game of the week, we say that only because of the pedigree of this game. There were some highly entertaining games, which we're gonna talk about later. But I think this one just had so much intrigue to it. Now let's talk about the end. Obviously, trailing the end of the game, Patrick Mahomes. It's 4th and 16. All the Bengals, and they're on their 40, I believe, or somewhere around there, right, Tom?
Yeah.
And Patrick Mahomes escapes pressure. All they have to do is knock the ball down in some way, throws it up, and there's a PI called, which I've watched it about 5 times. Don't have a dog in this game. I think it's the right call. But what I would say before we get into this is, this PI chunking in the air at the end is, there's just something we got to do. Again, I don't know what we do with this game, what we do with this play, but like Aaron, the greats really seem to be able to take advantage of it all the time. Granted, you just back away or you hit him just a split second later. Sorry, you don't back away because they'll catch the ball, but you hit him a split second later, you're probably not getting that call. But it just feels like, I don't know. Sometimes it just feels like a cheat code, and if you can manipulate, you manipulate it well. What was your guys' thoughts on this one? Tom, I'm going to let you go last because I want to hear what Shaun and Fletch have to say.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? It's like split second, like yeah, you say it's going to get called either way, depending on which side of that split second you are. It obviously favors the offense. How many times do we see where the ball just kind of gets lumped up in the air, and then they're kind of almost looking for the call as well because we know that it favors the offense. So, like you say, it is a bit of a cheat code, and it is unfortunate when you're on the other end of it. But at the same time, it is relatively consistent as well, I would say, across the season. So you kind of tend to, you might be on the wrong side of it one week, but then you'll get it back further down the line. So as long as it's consistent, I don't really mind it. It's when it starts being inconsistent on a regular basis, that's when I would have a problem with it.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think we're going to get onto a game where I am quite, I wouldn't say impassioned about a dodgy PI call, DPI call, but it's something that's going to pop up later in the episode where you may hear a bit more of my thoughts on it. But it's one of those things that unfortunately is going to get highlighted more than others. It's low hanging fruit. I'm sorry. Like my main thought on it at this point, especially when it comes down to the cheat, it's low hanging fruit, and I hate putting games down to one play or another play. You have ample opportunity throughout 60 minutes of a football game to win. One play doesn't change it.
I would agree with that, but we see increasingly with these great teams when they play each other, it's such a thin margin of error in terms of stuff, and so. I agree, Shaun. That's a great point you said. Sometimes you'll be the beneficiary of the same thing, but it does seem. I did see this stat today, and Tom, this is not a dig at Patrick Mahomes whatsoever, but he is, since 2018, has the most come from behind. I think it was like the most touchdowns or points off of PI calls in the league since 2018 or something like that. I'll try to find it while we're talking later. But again, I think that actually has to do more with his skill of doing it. But last night was nothing skill. That was just like, I'm chucking the ball and just praying, or a prayer. There was no Aaron Rodgers, getting a free play sort of thing going on there. So, Tom, I know you're passionate about it. So what were your thoughts?
I just thought I agree with the consistency of it, and also, if they're going to call it, as it's happening. As opposed to, it seemed to be a long time waiting until they actually threw the flag, which I think is what drew the controversy more than anything. Because, it's textbook defensive pass interference, but the fact that it took so long for the call to actually be made, I think was part of the issue that I think people had with it. But, as you said, as Shaun said, some of these things go one way and then the other way later in the season and stuff like that. And one thing I just push back on, well, not push back, but I'll say that the Chiefs were the most penalized team in the league last year, and they still went and won the Super Bowl. So yeah, it doesn't always stop you, but
I think
there we go.
I think one of them as well in a game like that, when you come down to the thin margins, to a certain extent, no matter what you call there, someone's walking away upset. If you don't call that, the Chiefs Tom, we're having a different conversation where Tom's saying he got in there early. Whatever. I think if you're the ref, and that's one point I want to make, that I actually think I want to kind of make one more thing on. In a game like that, you've got to be damn sure that's the right call. And I think that means not taking so long to make it. If it's a clear DPI, you're throwing that flag straight away. If you have to sit there and think, didn't it? If you have to look over to your ref on the other side and go, did you see what I saw? Yes, there are going to be certain places where angles don't help you with this, like, if it's spotting the ball, if it's a holding maybe in the middle of a play where there's lots of men on the line, you need that. But in a situation like that, if you have to don't throw I would say don't throw the flag, because if you're not sure, don't do it. That would be, I guess, my only thing where I would also have something to say on it, I guess.
Yeah. I watched it a few times today because I only got to watch the first half last night and I watched through the end, but I felt like it was the right call. But, I get what you're saying, Fletch. I think they are trying to get it right. And, it's a game deciding call in a lot of ways. Well, it could be potentially, Buckner's not missing a field goal. So, anyway, well, that's enough on that one. It'll be interesting. I feel like maybe that's not going to be the last time we see the Chiefs Bengals this year, but the Bengals are 0-2 now, which probability wise, that puts them behind the 8 ball in terms of the playoffs. So we'll see how they respond in week 3. The Chiefs will have the juggernaut Falcons in Atlanta on Sunday Night Football, because the scheduling gods really believed in Kirk Cousins, and they decided to give us 2 back-to-back primetime games against 2 of the best teams in the league. All right, let's move right along. We talked about underdogs. Well, the biggest underdog of the whole week outright won and killed a bunch of people's, what do they call them? Not sleeper picks, but
Survivor leagues.
Survivor leagues. Luckily, not mine. So that is, of course, the Las Vegas Raiders. Still doesn't sound right. Versus the Baltimore Ravens, which ended in a 26-23 victory. Again, I said it was the Ravens were an 8.5 favorite, and they won. A couple of highlights here. Brock Bowers in his second game in the NFL, 9 for 98. But the real star was Adams. He went 9 for 110 and a touch. Maxon Crosby had 2 sacks. And it was just a great game. Now the Ravens were up 10 points in the fourth quarter and lost. Now, I say that only because the Ravens, since 2021, as a fact, have the most losses in the fourth quarter when up by double digits. What is that about? Guys, did you guys get a chance to check this game out? Did you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I saw the highlights. I watched the highlights earlier on. Minshew Mania is in Vegas, it seems, driving the ball downfield. It was weird to see, actually. I've got a friend who's a Raiders fan, and he was all doom and gloom. But then by the end of the day, he was very excited. Devontae Adams was, for a player who prior to the season was supposedly incredibly unhappy and didn't want to be there, he's balling out. So that's always nice to see. I know you mentioned Bowers. He had a great game. I had it written down here somewhere. I think he had was it an 85-yard catch or something? It was something pretty impressive. But as much as they look good, the Ravens just looked really sluggish. I thought they had like a week 1 hangover. I don't know what it was. They didn't look right. Everything just didn't. It seemed a bit slower. They didn't get Likely involved at all, which I don't know whether he's maybe injured or something. But he was hardly featured at all, which then really struggled with them in the passing game. And yeah, they didn't look right. They looked like they were struggling, and Vegas took advantage of it. I still don't expect them to have a great season, but what a night for the Vegas fans.
You sign King Henry to a $12 million deal, and then you still haven't quite figured out how to use him and get him out. Like, you're up, again, you're up 10 points in the fourth quarter, and you're not just giving the ball to Henry and getting first downs. It seems a bit odd. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I agree with you, Chapman. Like, that's what you bring Derrick Henry to do. You're up by 10 points. You just want to run out the game, run out the clock. Force forced the Raiders to do something, but they just played into the Raiders' hands. I mean, I think Lamar Jackson had an absolutely atrocious second half. He really couldn't get the ball to his receivers. I mean, Mark Andrews had an okay game, I guess. But one thing that I found really interesting was after Minshew threw the pick in the second quarter, I think it was, to Marlon Humphrey, the Max Crosby went up to him and, he just gave him that pep talk of, you're still our guy. You're still, it just shows the leader that Max Crosby is in that locker room. And it really galvanized the Raiders towards, coming back into that game. Obviously, there was a big play where I think it was on third down where the Raiders needed a stop. And Max Crosby came running through, took down Lamar, which forced them to then go for it on fourth down, which they didn't quite do. So fair play to the Raiders, really. Great comeback in the second half, but again, a game that the Ravens gave away, and it's their first 0-2 start since 2015. So I think John Harbaugh, in some of these games where they're up in the fourth quarter, like you got to question especially some of the clock management issues and stuff as well for the Ravens. So, but yeah, great win for the Raiders.
To be fair to Henry, he did have 84 yards on the ground, but it still just felt like a weak 84. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
it's almost like we are like, I think myself and probably everyone going into the season was like, how amazing is it going to be to have Lamar and him and Henry in the backfield and what all the things they're going to do, but it's almost like they're getting in each other's way a little bit. They don't really know how to use it. They don't know which one to use at what time, and then it just all gets a bit messy. It's just, I think it'll settle down, and I think as the season goes on, they'll figure it out. But it just feels a bit messy at the moment. It doesn't feel very organized.
To be fair to Baltimore, the Ravens Raiders, hard to say, also didn't have a great day on the ground either. I know because I have White in a couple of leagues, and like for them to figure out that run game. Also, I do want to mention that Antonio Pierce got eviscerated last week for punting on the 40 last week, I believe, on it, and I think he went for it like twice in this game with fourth down in a couple of places. So I guess he heard that criticism and moved on. So anyway, it was an entertaining game. I was switching around obviously with some of the other 1:00 games, but as you said, Baltimore now 0-2, and I believe their schedule does not get any easier. And they've got kind of a gauntlet coming up. I don't have it in front of me, but anyway, I know that it's they're going to be some concern there, and I think they're going to
Bills, aren't they? I think they're playing.
Yeah, I believe, and then I know they have Dallas, and I believe they also
and
they have. Do they have you guys too at some point here? No, they have they might have the. Yeah.
No, you're right. I think they've got Dallas next. I think they're traveling to Dallas next week, and then I think they might be traveling to Buffalo as well. So it's two tough games. Very losable games as well. So, but then again, the Cowboys looked absolutely terrible. So,
well, the Cowboys were Jekyll and Hyde. So, let's not all. And we're going to be talking about that game here in a second. Fletch, I'm so glad you got back in time, because now we're going to talk about what I picked as the game of the week on my side. It was the game that I watched for the review, which was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Detroit Lions, which was a 20-16 victory for the Tampa Bay Bucs. I will say this: this whole weekend felt a lot about defense, and it felt old school football. Something maybe we can discuss here in a minute. I watched this game. I really enjoyed it, only because it was old school football and it was all about the defense. Unfortunately, the best player in the game didn't end up winning the game, which was Aiden Hutchinson. It was his coming out game. He had 4.5 sacks on Mayfield. He looked like a monster. Should have been, I think it was 5 on the screen, but I think they counted as a half a sack later after the game was over. I would say it was a dominant game by him. He looked great. But the Buccaneers, to their credit, and I think this is not as much about the Lions not playing well, though Goff definitely had a real off day. I think it was the Bucs showing that they have a lot of balance as a team. They can do just enough. They're going to play sound football. They're basically a carbon copy of a little bit of what I thought that the Lions were kind of the first 2 years before this last year, where they kind of broke out as an offensive juggernaut, where they play smart football. Their quarterback typically doesn't make too many mistakes, and they have some good offensive weapons that did just enough in this game. It's a low scoring game. Again, like I said, Goff just had an off day. I think it was 3 interceptions. He still threw for 307 yards. I think this is a little more about the Bucs than it is about the Lions. But I will mention this: at the end of the half, the Lions have a chance to maybe kick a field goal. There's some sort of miscommunication with the field goal team and Goff and the offense, but Dan Campbell took credit. It's another one of those where Dan Campbell's ability to be a strategist in terms of his game calling kind of bit him in his butt. I appreciate the fact that he took credit for it, and he said it was his fault. But and again, I'm only talking a lot because this was my game, and I appreciate that. But again, that makes you kind of question when you're going to get up against the McVays and the Shanahans in the world. Dan has to do better, and he has to be smarter about that stuff. Fletch, Tom, I think both of you are nodding your heads, so I'll throw it to both of you guys or one of you guys. Fletch, pop in here.
Yeah. Look, it's one of those things. I think this game came down to, from a Lions fan's perspective, I'm going to struggle. Obviously, I'll struggle to give an unbiased perspective. A lot of what I saw the game from a Lions perspective, and pretty much a Lions perspective only. So, a lot of the games from what I saw was just a couple of things creeping back and problems showing that we previously had. And in things like, look, it's been a Dan Campbell's clock management and just kind of general in the moment game management has come into question a few times. I am not going to be the one to sit here and go, we've had 3 years of this. You need to have had it cleaned up by now. Look, mistakes are going to happen at some point. No coach will be 100% perfect. Would I like things like that to be, you should be prepared for things like that. I'm not saying it's egregious, but situations like that should be prepared for better. You should have that plan in place just in case, those contingency plans. The number one thing came down for me, and I was kind of walking home from work before going through well, if I could give 2 or 3 positives and 2 or 3 rooms for improvement, they would be positives. I saw the continuous targeting of Jameson Williams. That is not something we've seen. In the previous seasons, Jared Goff has maybe targeted him 2 or 3 times in a game. Not only did he target him, I think it was nearly 10 times throughout the game. Some of those are getting the ball away, so they class as targets, but they aren't really. Some of those were, he got involved in an end around. He got involved in a bit of the running game as well, which is great to see. But, the continuous usage of Jameson Williams and the D-line showed great improvement, continued great improvement. Last week, it didn't turn into sacks, but you're playing Matthew Stafford. Very few quarterbacks have that pocket awareness, that self-awareness, that ability to read a field and think on the fly as Matthew Stafford. End of story. It's not always going to translate to sacks against him. Baker Mayfield, this is not a slight at Baker Mayfield, isn't like Matthew Stafford in that sense. Couple of negatives. Red zone offense has to be better. Has to be better. I think we had 7 trips to the red zone and came away with 1 touchdown. And that was, you can't rely on getting to the 2-yard line and then saying, right, David Montgomery, you've got 4 downs here to pound it into the end zone, which is going to happen. It's inevitable, but you can't rely on that. Ben Johnson gets too cute. And the only other thing I saw was Jared Goff did something that I thought I'd never really seen before. He's been known as the check down king before. We spoke to Shaun about this earlier off camera. The amount of times he only saw one receiver and it was his primary target and he didn't look elsewhere. A couple of you'd see Laporta get open, but he's only looking at Amon-Ra. Jameson Williams got open, he's only looking at Amon-Ra. The interception, there was 2 of it. Yeah, there was 2 of them. Second one, horrible. They say that elbow got clipped. I don't see enough there for it to be a true, to truly throw him off like that. The other one being that first one at the start of the game. go back to that PI stuff again. Terry and Arnold got called for, softly called for hands. I think it was the correct call, but it was soft. It was one of those. Jameson Williams got body checked on the way round. That was a DPI all day, every day. Never got called. It was an anticipation throw. It got picked. So yeah, those are a couple of the things that my takeaways from it, I guess.
I was just going to say, just quickly on it, Chris Godwin had a really good game against the Lions. You know, he had 117 yards and a touchdown. And fair play to the Bucs for holding out on the Lions as well, because I know the Lions were driving to try and take a lead in the game late on, and the Bucs defense held firm. So yeah, very impressive by them, and very much a surprise 2-0 team. You would think, but yeah,
they're going to be fun. They're going to be fun to watch, and they're going to have big players as well. They're not going to they're going to struggle moving the ball consistently, but they're just going to have these explosive players. You can see it, and that's going to be fun. Maybe not as a fan of the team, but as a neutral, it's going to be fun to watch those explosive players that they're going to inevitably do every game.
Yeah, definitely.
Can anybody tell me the leading rusher of the game?
Baker Mayfield. I don't know.
Baker Mayfield.
That was a guess. Yeah,
It was Baker Mayfield. I'm a little mad at myself because I meant to come on to start this pod to say one of my predictions at the beginning of the season, which I was laughed at by our esteemed colleague Carl, and I believe there's some snickering between Tom and Ollie, but I'm not gonna project here. But I said the NFC South would not be the worst division in football. Now it would be, but I did say with the caveat it would be more entertaining this year. We could still see a bunch of 7-9 teams. I don't know, or 7-10. But sorry, I'm still old. But I think after the first 2 weeks, I think this division is going to be a lot more interesting than it has been in past years, minus the lowly Carolina Panthers. Which leads us to our final big game of the week that we decided, which was the Saints Cowboys, which was a 44-19 victory. I would just like to say this. The Saints, after 2 weeks, and this does me no happiness to say this, but this is for Mrs. Fletch, having scored 57 points in their opener, and the Saints now have a tallied 91 points in the 2 games this season, according to the NFL. Only 2 teams since 1970 have scored the same or more, which is the first 2 games. It was the 1971 Cowboys, 91 points, and the 2009 Saints, 93 points. Both those teams went on to win the Super Bowl, which is very depressing for me. The star of this game was Alvin Kamara, Kamara. Alvin looked like his old self, 115 yards, 3 touchdowns, huge game for him. Carr looked like the Carr from 2016 when he was an MVP candidate, played really well. Cowboys had no answer for the Saints offense.
No,
are you guys buying the New Orleans Saints?
Jerry Jones. Let me just get that out there. the Saints just look. It's crazy. I'm actually excited about watching Derek Carr, and that is really weird to say. It's not something I thought I would ever say, but their offense looks just insanely good. They've got so many weapons. They're doing so much creativity. I think have they got a new offensive coordinator?
Yeah, can an offensive coordinator win Coach of the Year? Or is
he is dialing up some fun stuff. Like it's mad. And,
so it's Gary Kubiak's son. I forgot his first name, but it's Kubiak. So he comes from that line. He comes from that.
Is it Clint Kubiak or something? Maybe.
Yeah, it's something possibly. A bit. Yeah, they just look fun. Like they just look like every single player on the field is just enjoying
soon to
themselves.
Be a NFL head coach, Kubiak. That's probably.
Can we have?
Sorry.
No, it's it looks. I mean, Kamara was insane. He had 4 touchdowns. I think it was 3 rushing, 1 receiving. The Cowboys had nothing. Like you say, they couldn't get anywhere near Carr. Like Parsons basically did nothing. Like they could not defend the outside the numbers players. They had nothing. And even the CD Lamb touchdown was a bit of luck. I know there was kind of a missed tackle there, and he ducked underneath. I think it was is it a Debo, and got free. But Yeah, they were just. It
And
was
then
amazing.
Paulson Adebo had an interception later on as
He
well.
did, yeah. He
with
recovered.
Dak
Yeah, that
Prescott,
was
where
brilliant.
he ran all the way to the
I
20
thought he
yard
was going
line.
in. I thought he was going to get in.
I thought he was for a minute as well. Rashid Shaheed as well. My God, that
He's
guy
so fast.
blazing speed. You just throw it to him, runs it in for a touchdown. I could not love this game more. I hate the Cowboys so much, so I don't care who it is beating them up. But
I could not watch this game to save my life. It was 35-16. Every time I turned it on, I was just watching Kamara going in the end zone. And I was like, what is happening here? My soul just basically was slowly coming out of my body. I was so sad. But, you know, I will say this as somebody who loves football. I do really like Kamara. I have like a secret, like I do. He's like, if you got to have one player on a team that you absolutely hate, which I think is fine. It's Kamara for me. And, yeah, I don't want to see him doing that against the Falcons in 2 weeks, but he looked dynamite. And they just they demoralized the Cowboys, like demoralized them. And I heard that CeeDee Lamb and Dak were kind of getting into it on the sidelines at one point. Now, what's interesting though is the Saints only scored like 9 points in the second half, but I think they just took
the pedal off.
They took. I mean, they knew that they had just beaten the pants off these guys. So. It's interesting. What are we thinking about the Cowboys? I mean, they have a good victory last week against obviously the Browns.
Same old Cowboys.
Same old Typical Cowboys.
Good teams, you know. It's just this cycle of, you know, they get so hyped up. They beat up on. Sorry to say, Sean. They beat up on the Giants. They beat up on, you know, the NFC East, other than the Eagles. And then they get hyped up as this great team. Oh, they're going in a Super Bowl, and then they go and lose in the playoffs. But you know, they always lay an egg at home, at least one a season, and they've definitely done that this week. So yeah, they just did not look at the races at all. The run game looked pretty atrocious, really. With who is it? It's Ezekiel Elliott and Deuce Vaughn. I think. I don't know how many yards they combined for, but I don't think it was that many. But yeah, fair play to the Saints. So that Saints offensive line to stifle, you know, not allow Michael Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence to wreck the game was very impressive. So I think, yeah, I'm not going to be sleeping on the Saints anymore.
No.
I would like to be on record here, and I'm going to look at my wife as I say it. Now, I said earlier this season that, well, in the off season, I pounded the drum. I beat the drum for the Saints being one of the worst teams in the NFL that they want to be picking, probably potentially in the top 3. And I'm going to look my wife dead in the eye as I say this. I was wrong, and I am sorry. I was wrong, and I am sorry. So you have it on record. I'm not gonna edit this out. I have apologized to my wife's face. I was wrong about the Saints.
I hope she plays that back to you like loads now, like all the time. She just plays you back saying, "I'm sorry."
I'm now allowed to sleep on a place. Not on the couch anymore. I don't have to sleep on the couch anymore as well. But I do have to sleep next to her while she's asleep.
A little futon at the end of the bed now is.
No, I just have to. Even while she's sleeping, she's got a smug little look on her face. You know, it's one of those things. But I said as well, look, if there was one thing I was going to beat the drum for before this weekend, was the Cowboys don't lose at home, and they got and just what I so enjoyed watching the Cowboys get their asses handed to them at home. It was such an enjoyable experience.
You know, I think it's interesting. I'm pretty sure, because we've all talked. Shaun, I don't know about you, but I know all of you didn't watch the NFL in the 90s, and we're too young probably to remember the 90s Cowboys that we all hated because they were, you know, basically the Patriots, right? So you guys all just hate the Cowboys because they've just been lauded for 30 years and Jerry Jones because of that. And that just kind of warms my heart a little bit. Well, Shaun, I know you don't like him for more obvious reasons, but it's just funny to me that the hate has been passed down through generations.
That is one thing every NFL fan can agree on. Everyone hates the Cowboys.
So. Excellent. So those were our 4 games of the week as picked by me, the host. We try to be a little more democratic with how we do games, but I feel like those were good. Now we're going to move on. We're going to do more quicker hits here, but we are going to chat through some other kind of meaningful games. And there's some still meat on the bone here, gentlemen. There's still some good stuff here. We're going to start off with a game that was what I like to call sneaky good. And luckily we have our own Giants fan, Shaun, here. Now, Shaun, I'm sorry. It was a Commanders win against the New York Giants, 21-18, but it was quite an entertaining game. We saw some signs of life from one Daniel Jones. We also saw some heroics from rookie Jaden Daniels, who I think through 2 weeks looks like the best rookie quarterback of the last year's class. Shaun, tell us about this game. What happened and why did the Giants lose?
We lost because we don't have a kicker is the reason why we lost, which is number 1 point. Even though we have a spare roster spot and our kicker was on the injury report on Saturday, we still didn't have a kicker going into the game. And then we even got him out to kick off and then chase after a 100-yard return that was chalked off and pull his hamstring. So that was why we lost. But into more detail of that, we had a good game. We played well. Jones didn't look awful. Like when you come off a week like we had week 1 where he just did everything wrong. They dumbed down the offense for him, don't get me wrong. They kept everything really simple, put everything right in front of his eyes. Despite that, he still then somehow managed to miss Malik Neighbors running right in front of him and threw into triple coverage. But that aside, Malik Neighbors was elite. He had 10 receptions. I think it was like 127 yards, a touchdown. It helped potentially win my fantasy league, so that's always nice. And we really did well on defense. Our red zone defense was really good. I mean, that's the whole system. Shane Bowen's red zone defense, that's what he's pride on. He's bend, don't break. We did have some issues where we had third and medium, third and long, and we just sort of sat off and invited them to go underneath and then just get that third down at a conversion, and then we just started the drive again. But we lost because we didn't have a kicker. We played well enough to win. They didn't score a touchdown. They had a lot of possession, took a lot of time off the clock, but it came down to not having a kicker. We had to go for it every time, and we didn't do well in that. So it was a shame that we didn't come away with the win, but there was at least some signs of life.
Somewhat agree with you, Shaun, with the kicker thing, but also Malik Neighbors towards the end of the game, he could have caught that ball that Daniel Jones threw. That was a catchable ball. That was a catchable ball as well. So
it's hard to knock him because he had such a good game.
Such a good game that he did.
He should have caught it, and these things are going to happen. I wouldn't put that on. I wouldn't put the game on him. At the end of the day, it was mismanagement from the coach to not have that kicker there. But yeah, if he'd have caught that would have been nice. But
what? I mean, I guess would you have to put the on on pup and then bring it like I don't even know how that works. Honestly, that's weird.
I'm not sure. We had a roster spot, so we could have elevated someone. We have a kicker in the practice squad that we could have brought up. Like it was just a shocking decision. And then to come out after the game and he was asked about it, and he basically has this contempt for the media where he just gives one-word answers now and just doesn't like to speak to them, which is the worst thing you can do.
Everyone thinks they're Bill Belichick.
It's the worst thing you can do in a New York media. Like, you just can't do that. They're not going to accept that. And he basically said, well, I'm not a doctor, so what do you want me to do? And the whole thing was just a shambles. He basically said that he was on the injury report because he had a groin injury and he pulled a hamstring, so that's not the same, and he's not a doctor. And you just think, that is just... that is not what you want to hear from the coach. You want him to come out and own it, take the responsibility, move on, concentrate on the positives. But he just relit the fire and everyone went nuts. But it was a shame because there were some good things there, but unfortunately that cost us.
I mean, who would have thought, though, that a Bill Belichick coaching tree branch would have an ego with the media? Who would have thought it? That's never happened before. We took the DC, and that was obviously that wasn't a problem.
We've just had one. This is the second one, and yeah, it's just gone as well.
See, the thing
is, let's move right
it.
along, guys. We got. Oh, go ahead, Fletch.
So you mentioned that though. My number one gripe in the NFL is prevent defense. I asked the question ages ago, and I think someone thought I was being serious. I said, why, what does prevent defense do? And someone said, well, it prevents big plays. And I was being facetious, I was being sarcastic. What does prevent defense do? Because it doesn't prevent anything. It inevitably doesn't prevent anything. Sorry, that's my little rant.
I'll come back to that when we have our question later, because I've got something to say about that.
Well, it just depends. We'll write that down for a pod later, so we can get through these games. The next game on the schedule that I thought was really interesting was Cleveland Browns defeating the now 0-2 Jacksonville. 0-2 Jacksonville Jaguars. I'd like to call this game the Trevor Lawrence game because he looked awful.
And in his last 7 starts is not great.
And he was throwing balls. I kept going back to this one again. This was a defensive struggle. I will say, if Ollie was here, we saw some signs of life from Deshaun. I watched a really good drive, which I think all of us were watching at the same time because on the chat everybody said it. He drove down, nice touchdown. He had almost 200 yards, I believe, on the day. 186, no touchdowns, but again, wasn't a dumpster fire, which I guess is an improvement. So I think he heard a lot of what's going on this week with him, not off the field, but more on the field. Anyway, the Browns are still a tough out with that defense.
Didn't they have a safety as well? I think they had a safety on the Jags potentially. Maybe
I
think they did.
Maybe possibly.
Yeah,
I'll look.
I'm sure they did.
I saw a rally post about.
Oh, they did. They did have a safety. Oh, this was great. It's towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
The Browns decide instead of kicking a really 50-something yard field goal, they punt. There's probably I've forgotten, no time left. They punt down to the 1. It was one of the best punts you'll ever see.
Yeah,
absolutely Google this punt.
Wasn't it? It was Buccaneers. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
punt.
and then Trevor Lawrence takes the ball, just gets sacked in the end zone. I mean, should have thrown it almost immediately. And I think it was a Garrett. I think it was Garrett got him. I mean, it was a thing of beauty. Mm-hmm. And he just got up oh, thanks for reminding me, Tom. That was a great end. Go ahead.
At what point do we say that Lawrence is a bust? Because surely it's getting to that point.
Well, he's already signed that contract, hasn't he? So he's going to stay in Jacksonville for the time being.
It was right. Not.
It wasn't Myles Garrett, was it? No,
it wasn't Myles Garrett.
It was right.
No, but he did have a sack in the game, though. I'm pretty sure he did.
Did he?
Plus the Jags. The one bright spot for the Jags was I would say.
He did. Garrett did have a sack, and so did Jordan Hicks.
Was Brian Thomas Jr. I think he had 2 receptions, but he had 90-odd yards as well.
Yeah.
So I think he was the one bright spot for them. But yeah, you're right. Trevor Lawrence was pretty awful, to be honest.
Yeah. So the Browns aren't awful. They're now 1-1. The Jags are 0-2. I'm gonna go ahead and say Peterson is definitely on the maybe possibly betting first coach to be fired list for me, which I'm gonna start looking at for next week because we're gonna get close to week 6, and I think we're gonna have a coach fired before week 6 this year.
Is the AFC North on drugs though? Because you got the Steelers at 2-0, you got the Browns at 1-1, and both the Bengals and the Ravens at 0-2. It's just a bit nuts, really.
Well, I think they talked to the NFC South and they were like, "Hey guys, let's just change it up this year."
Have a year off.
When's the Jags bye week?
Good question. I think it's later in the year.
Would it be? Is it after they've been to London?
Presumably around London, won't it? Yeah. It will be.
If they're in London, I would say maybe look for after London. Maybe look for Doug Peterson to be lining up at a job centre near Wembley at the beginning of November.
Could somebody send me that address? I could use it. Anyway,
not tomorrow. You won't.
That's right. All right. Moving right along. I also watched this one with a slight side eye, but the Seahawks at the New England Patriots. Seattle wins in overtime, 23-20. Again, a sneaky, really fun game. It could have gone either way. I came away more impressed with Seattle in this one. Geno did just enough. He wasn't perfect, but did just enough. He had some great performances from his wide receivers, including Njigba, who was on my bench.
I
had Metcalf
in 2 leagues.
I had
In
DK
2
Metcalf
leagues.
starting, and he gave me 28.9 fantasy points, I think. Obviously, that long busted coverage touchdown, but you'll take it any day of the week. Yeah, a good performance from the Seattle pass catchers, other than Tyler Lockett. So both JSN and
The
DK
Pats didn't
Metcalf.
look awful, though. To be fair, they didn't.
They
They didn't look
didn't. They have
bad.
nothing to hang
The
their
ru-
hat about.
The run
No.
game was good. There's
Nope.
some signs there, so that's good.
They're going to be a
Unlike-
tough out. They're a lot tougher out than I thought they would be. To be honest.
Yeah, I'm actually very impressed with Mayo as we go through, and much to my chagrin, and listening to our awesome preview podcast, which is every Thursday, which also stars 2 Patriots fans, which I've listened to. I would say, yeah, hats off. They're not going to be a 4-13 team. I don't know what their ceiling is, but they're definitely not gonna be the worst team. And I think they, I don't know if it's going to be a 7-win season, but I think they're going to build on something here, and they're
The
tough.
foundations are there, definitely.
Sometimes, though, you find if someone's come through the ranks, if you've not got a completely new head coach that's new to the team and everything like that, not so many things completely change within the organisation. It gives them a little bit more stability, but you still don't have enough tape on. So the team's a little bit more stable, and you don't really, though, have the tape on them going into the season. I would like to see what happens by week 4, week 5, when teams have started to gather tape on what this team looks like. I'm not obviously the Patriots could genuinely be just a decent team, but this could also just be a bit of, there's no real tape on them at the moment. See what happens.
I agree, but and we all know Jacoby Brissett again has a low ceiling, but they're just going to play smart football, and I think that's probably the DNA that Mayo and Belichick, Mayo gets from Belichick, if that makes any sense. Just play smart. It gives you a chance to be in games. Doesn't mean they're going to always convert those games, and I think it's silly to think they were just going to be, because to be fair, they were a dumpster fire last year, and this year, and again that change of that new coach change of scenery could sort of help, I think.
Sure.
But we'll see. Moving along, I was laying in bed last night after I turned the TV off. I was still had Chiefs Bengals on my iPad in bed, and I was looking, and I just start seeing Marvin Harrison Jr. has arrived. Marvin Harrison Jr. arrived. That's because Marvin Harrison had a phenomenal second game in his rookie campaign last night for the Cardinals. They beat the Rams it's in Arizona, right? 10-40.
They absolutely
10
beat them
10-41.
That game was over within 10 minutes. Like literally, the first 10 minutes, it was over. They were never coming back from that.
What was it 24-3 going into the second quarter or something? Like ridiculous.
It was crazy. And Kyler Murray, like I've always been on the fence of Kyler Murray, but he looked electric last night.
Oh, I'm very high on Kyler Murray, and he, perfect passer rating. As you said, Sean, great game. Marvin Harrison, 2 touchdowns. That second one, the way he just extended to get over the goal line as well was really impressive without touching down.
They have a good run game as well. They look sneaky good. Like I'm surprised, to be honest.
Yeah.
And more, oh, go ahead, Fletch. Sorry.
I was going to say, one of the things is just speaking about Kyler Murray. I didn't get to mention it on the preview pod, but I have it in my notes here. I said they targeted Kyler Murray targeted Marvin Harrison Jr. got 4 yards on 1 reception in week 1. Despite how many times he got open, I said the second they got into that film room on Monday morning, they said that's not happening again. Watch for Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. That was in my notes to say on Thursday, but just didn't quite get the time.
The Rams have got problems, man. Obviously injuries have obviously caused some of that, but they look all over. I don't know what their team is. I don't know what their identity is at the moment. I don't think they know either, to be honest. It's a weird team.
Bad offensive line. You got Cooper Kupp now out with a knee injury, which also affects my fantasy team. This is going to be a reoccurring thing every week, guys. I'll be venting through this podcast. They just look jumbled, but they just got punched in the mouth and they couldn't.
Even Matt Stafford didn't look fully healthy either, to be honest. No. He looked like a shell of himself out there. He had a couple good throws deep. But moving forward, I don't know what their passing attack's going to look like. Their running attack didn't look that great either. Obviously, I know Kyren Williams stopped a little bit of embarrassment by scoring that touchdown, but still, it was rough going.
Well, interesting enough, this kind of leads into our next game, which was another NFC West team that lost, which was the San Francisco 49ers in Minnesota against the Vikings. And it was a 23-17 win for the Vikings. Sam Darnold, the Darnold-sants, the hipsters of the NFL all celebrate today. It was a really good game by Minnesota Vikings. To me, I don't know what you guys say, but I think Kevin O'Connell has now put a flag into I'm one of the top coaches in this freaking league. He got rid of Kirk Cousins, gave him to the lonely Atlanta Falcons. He's now winning games against the NFC champion 49ers with Sam Darnold. What do we think, guys? Justin Jefferson's also very, very good at football.
Let's give Sam Darnold some credit as well. That 97-yard touchdown he threw
that was crazy.
Justin Jefferson, who then, do you know what was more impressive on that play? That the ref was running faster than the 49ers defensive backs.
That was,
almost outrunning Justin Jefferson to get to the end zone. But yeah, fair play to the Vikings, man. And Jalen Naylor as well. He looked really good in that game as well. So
yeah.
He did in the first game as well. Sam Darnold's ghosts have crossed over to the other side, seemingly, and he doesn't see them anymore, which is annoying. But but also, the Giants obviously didn't lose last week because because of ourselves. It was obviously because the Vikings are just so good. So that was nice to see.
What do you got queued up?
I had it queued up here to say, me and Tom were talking before about the ref on that Justin Jefferson, because that really was seriously impressive. I actually read one of the next gen stats that Justin Jefferson traveled 127.5 yards on the entire play, which was in itself impressive. But one thing I think is more impressive, and I kind of learned this kind of yesterday, the last time the San Francisco 49ers won in Minnesota was December 1992.
Wow.
That was just a crazy stat. I was barely twinkling my father's eye at that point.
They're kind of a bit of a bogey team for them as well, because I think that the Vikings won last year at the Niners as well, right? When what's his name? When Jordan Addison took it away from Charvarius Ward and ran it in to the end zone, because I think they won that game too. So yeah, it's
I'm pretty sure the Vikings were like a 3-win streak against him. I looked before.
There you go.
Yeah. No, it was in Minnesota last year. It was in Minnesota.
That was in Minnesota as well.
And the Vikings have a 2-win streak on the 49ers.
Nice. Well, it's impressive. I think it's more about, again, Minnesota than it is anything about the 49ers. I think the 49ers will be just fine.
That play by Fred Warner, though, was incredible as well. That interception. Just one last
see that one.
Yes.
That was a beautiful interception.
I will Google Fred Warner interception after the pod.
That'll be a long list.
So those were our quick hits. Now we're going to move on to our very, very quick hits. I'm just going to read out the scores, gentlemen. If anybody has anything to say, save it to the end, and then we'll pick up on anything. So the rest of the games here, we had the Jets beating the Titans 24-17. The Jets go to 1-0. Titans go to 1-1, and I believe the Titans go to 0-2. 1-2. The Bears were defeated last night by the Houston Texans in Houston on Sunday Night Football, 13-19. I heard this was a very sloppy one. Caleb Williams did not look great. CJ Stroud looked well, but it was a mostly defensive game, which is the theme of the weekend. Colts versus Packers. Somehow Malik Willis beats Richardson in Green Bay 10-16. The two worst games of the weekend, we had the Los Angeles Chargers beating the Carolina Panthers 26-3, and then also the Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Denver Broncos yesterday at 13-6 in a sludge match where I heard Bo Nix look like the Auburn Bo Nix and not like the Oregon Bo Nix. That one's for my family who are a bunch of Auburn fans. Any takeaways from any of those games, guys?
I was going to say Calvin Ridley, the Calvin Ridley touchdown was what a catch that was. I mean, it wasn't even a good throw, but the catch was insane for that touchdown.
Now on the Titans, just FYI.
I had him on my bench as well, but it didn't matter because I had Metcalf and Neighbours, so it's fine.
I would even go worse, by the way, as far as Bo Nix goes. He looks like the Florida State DJ Ugalele. Just awful. Sorry, Gary. I want to say a huge, like, one of our good friends of the Asleep at Work Network, Panthers Magpie, travelled all the way over to Carolina to watch that over at the weekend. As a Panthers fan, and I've got to say, I hope that Bojangles was worth it.
I feel less sad now that I don't have tickets to the Giants Panthers game in Munich, because that could be a terrible, terrible game.
Whose first win is that? That's what I want to know.
I mean, if it's not ours, just set the place on fire and just rebuild it, because if we can't beat that team, and this is going to come back and bite me, I know it is. Someone's going to clip this. It's going to come back. But if we don't win that game, my God. Listen,
can we just all agree that after that game, it's over between us and Germany? They paid the price.
Yeah.
We're all good now.
We punished them enough.
We are
done.
Like Germany, we are good. We are okay.
Yeah, not a ton of greatness there, but yeah, interesting enough. Well, that's it for the review show, guys. I will mention, because I am the host and I get to, that the Atlanta Falcons play Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia tonight on Monday Night Football. My strategy is I will try to go to bed at a normal time, wake up about 15 minutes before kickoff. We'll open the one can of Sweetwater 420, which is a local Georgia beer that I smuggled on the plane back, and hopefully watch my team look competent tonight. And the keys to victory for the Atlanta Falcons is this: put the game in the hands of the running game, which is Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Mix it up with them. The O-line has to play better than it did last week against the Steelers, which was a travesty. Don't make Kirk Cousins do everything. He's clearly still working through stuff. I believe Kirk can come around, but it's going to take him a few weeks. If you even look at Aaron Rodgers, who's about 6 weeks ahead of him in terms of his progression, Aaron Rodgers still looks a little rusty too. So all I can say is if any chance to win this game is the defense plays like it did last week, a little bit tighter, that you force Hurts into some turnovers and you let Bijan have a Bijan game that we've been waiting for in Atlanta for about 18 games now. Anyway, that's Monday Night Football.
If you could just get Kyle Pitts the ball a few times for my fantasy purposes, that would be useful.
Also, I'm not quite sure what the NFL schedule makers are doing, because they've put Kirk Cousins 3 years in a row in Philadelphia
on the second week.
In week 2. So yeah, there we go.
Well, we know most everybody that works for all these teams is from the Northeast. There's a lot of. It's why the Jets get so much praise for whatever reason. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be an interesting game. Obviously the Eagles are coming off of, they've got a couple extra days rest coming from that Friday game. Brazil, the defense they don't have a TJ Watt, but they've got a great, they've got a really solid line. I'd really like to see our defensive line step up on that running game with Saquon, so that you force Hurts to play, because the strength of our defense is obviously the spine of the safeties and our linebackers, though we are going to be missing one of our linebackers. So we'll see. I mean, honestly, I think it's hard as a Falcons fan, because there's two camps of Falcons fans. There's everything's fine, we're gonna be Super Bowl champions, and then there's the whole world is burn it down, we are the Carolina Panthers, and there's I'm sort of in this middle space. But I just don't want us to embarrass ourselves. That's kind of my bar at this point. Anyway, thank you for indulging me.
It's okay. Can we just say Shaun and the Giants took care of the whole not being able to beat a team that can't score a touchdown? You should be okay this week.
We should have mentioned that fact. Whew.
I have no words.
If you're missing that, the Giants...
I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. That's all I'm going to say.
The Giants are the first team in NFL history to score 3 touchdowns and not allow a touchdown and still lose a game. But to be fair to you, Shaun, the Falcons are usually in the weird, we've lost a game by some weird historical way. So I'm right there with you, brother. Guys, did you know that we had the most field goals ever in week 1 last week. I believe it was 60, 61. This week wasn't far behind. The new dynamic kickoff is definitely affecting teams going for it. We have kickers that can kick a bajillion yards now. I personally, and this is an old school me, I personally would rather lose by Devontae Adams making a great play or Isaiah Pacheco breaking loose and scoring a touchdown. There's nothing wrong with kicking field goals. It's not what I'm saying. But when the field goals start outweighing, the play on the field in terms of strategy, it takes away something in football. So we always end every show with a question. My question today is, should we rethink, if field goals become so prolific this season, should we rethink the field goal, and could we change the numerical amount you get for a field goal? My proposal is this. Fletch, you're going to get your time. You're going to get your time. My proposal would be this. Should we change it to where anything 35 and less is a 1 point score, is a 1 point. 35 to 55 is 2 point, and 55 plus is 3 points. Staying in field goal. Shaun, what say you?
Get rid of them entirely. I don't want to see another field goal for the rest of the season. Let's just make everyone go for it after a certain point, and they'll give them more points. Do the XFL stuff where they get more points depending on where they go from it for. That is my view. Get rid of field goals. Get rid of kickers. That's it.
You're wonderful, Shaun. Fletch, what is your rebuttal? You're bursting at the seams. You get it.
This is what I'm saying. Like, at the end of the day, I don't see the point in changing the way field goals work. I lost a few years ago. Dan Campbell cried at the podium after Justin Tucker hit a 66-yarder. It is what it is. I don't see that. At the end of the day, the field goal's the cop-out. I think if you are going to reinvent the field goal, I'm going to throw to what Shaun said. Do the whole go for it from the 2, 1 point, go for it from the 5, 2 points, go for it from the 10, 3 points. Why not go for something like that and make it even more fun? Eliminate the foot from football entirely.
Just like they did in college. Tom, have your say.
I don't know. I'm maybe in favor of the first part of it, where it's 20 to 35, but then I think 55 plus should just be as it is. But yeah, like the chip shot ones, I would be happy for those to be less points. But I think the longer ones, I think you just keep it as it is.
I want to propose this as well. If you miss from inside a certain range, you get a point taken off you. And I would love to see
just like in fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to see the scorigami where you lose 21 to -1 because your only attempt to score was a field goal that you missed.
Bears fans will love that one.
Oh, yeah.
Just as a reminder, we're an entertaining podcast. That's what we're here. We're here for these takes. I would just like to say I got this idea just learning about the field goals, not because I personally don't like field goals. The Atlanta Falcons went to a Super Bowl thanks to a Morton Anderson field goal back in 1998 against the Minnesota Vikings. But I think it's more of the dynamic kickoff now changing sort of the strategy of field positions. Also, if you don't know this, back in the 70s, that's when the 3-point line actually came into the NBA. I'm not an NBA historian, so please don't yell at me if I'm kind of off on that map. And then, they moved it back, I think, at some point after that, too. So it's, just to make it harder. And then, 3 points obviously exploded with the advent of Steph Curry coming into the league. But it's really interesting, just, how we're always adjusting the sport. And I just thought it was fun to say, and also just didn't have a better idea, to be honest with you, for a question. I was trying to be funny and I'm not funny. But Shaun, you killed it. Thank you, sir. Gentlemen. This was a awesome preview show. Review. I always do this at the end of the thing. I always call it the preview show. This was an awesome review show. You guys are amazing. Do you have any last thoughts on week 2 before we all go off and see what happens with this Eagles-Falcons game?
Congratulations. I want to say Kyler Murray was the only one this week that got a perfect passer rating, 158.3. We had a scorigami this week. Dallas Cowboys, New Orleans Saints was a scorigami. That's my favorite stat. And the NFL MacGuffin remains with the Kansas City Chiefs. Will it change next week? We don't know.
What's the MacGuffin?
I will not get into that right now. We can do it.
No, don't get into that.
We will not get into that right now.
Fletch, just for my own personal pleasure, can you say New Orleans again?
New Orleans. New Orleans. New Orleans.
Oh,
What did
you
I
are a Southern gentleman, Fletch.
New
You from
Orleans.
New Orleans. That's how you got your wife. You just talked sweet to her, didn't you?
You're dying right. You're dying
Yeah,
right
there we
about
go.
that.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Please, again, like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your family. We're trying to grow this podcast. We do it for fun, but we definitely want to keep it getting broader here. We are the one of the only UK centric, European centric NFL podcasts that has all fans. Anyway, please keep listening to the AAW network. If you're a college football fan, you got stuff for you. It's actually a bigger pod. We got to get these ones higher because the NFL should be beating college per normal. No, the college pod is great. We also, of course, will be back with you on Friday for our week 3 preview. That's a preview with Carl, Dave, Sam, the crew, Fletch. And that's pretty much it for us, guys. Anyway, I'm going to say goodnight, and we're going to say hurdle that scoregami.
Hey.
Hey-o.
Good.
Hurdle that, however you pronounce that city in Louisiana.
No, we're not going to do that.